When it happened, she didn't say, "Honey, we have to talk." I guess I should have seen it. But like most people, comfortable in their life, I ignored the signs until it was upon me. Some of us can be too trusting, but happen it did, and we better get to it. My wife and I lived in a cul-de-sac. The 6 homes along the front end were modest 3-bedroom houses. In contrast, the 4 toward the back end were 4-bedroom homes with more property than the rest. Living on the first corner home, I had never met or been invited into the bigger homes up the street. Not until the first block party the Goldsteins threw inviting everyone. My wife Marcy, 47, and I, Rick, 48, are in our late 40s and empty nesters for some time since our youngest son Kyle, 18, went to college upstate. Our daughter Rhonda, 20, is in the Navy, much to her father's chagrin. I am a retired Army colonel and adjusting to civilian life. If anyone who spent almost 30 years in the Army can, we are the Westons. So here we were at the Goldstein home backyard. Marcy was trying to endure Chuck Marston from across the street, talking her ear off about something. Chucky was probably trying to impress her with his muscles instead of the conversation. It can't be the topic as she rolls her eyes at me, giving me the save me signal, scratching her nose. But I'm talking to Jenny harshly, the single hot mom whose hubby left her with 2 kids and 40 pounds to lose. Well, Jenny has lost the pounds at the gym and is talking my ear off about fitness or something. I smile at my wife and scratch my own nose and smile. She gives me the "stop talking to the blonde and come rescue me if you ever want to get laid again" look. Taking Jenny by the hand, I lead her over to my wife and Chuck, the muscle man. Jenny lets me but is wondering why I dragged her over as much as my wife is. "Chuck," I say, reaching over to pump his hand. "Have you met Jenny?" He is a bit confused, thinking, but he manages to pull it together and reach over to take smiling Jenny's hand. I take the opportunity to rescue my wife. "My hero," she says, giving me the wife is not amused look, even though I saved her from the clutches of that cad. "Took you long enough. Let's go home," she says. I need to get to the airport early for my flight. On the way out, we pass that young couple, the Nielsen's, by the gate. Vincent Nielsen nods to me, making way, while his wife, Leslie, smiled politely. We had done the obligatory chat with every couple thing with them, so we just walked out. For some reason, Vinny's look toward me and his wife's stare seemed a bit strange, as if she was starving and looking at her next meal. Very strange indeed. The way they looked at each other after and back to us betrayed conspiratorial intentions. But after years in the service, the last spent in the intelligence branch made this retired Army guy a bit jumpy and eternally watchful. But I followed Marcy in the hope of some pre-trip parting sex. We are not strangers to separations. What with me having flown off to wars and training missions for years. That posting in Korea had about killed our marriage with us seeing each other only twice that year. It was supposed to be 4 times, but we got into a nasty argument when we met up in Hawaii and almost got divorced. Long story that one. You'll get the abbreviated version. Years of military life take a toll on any marriage. The separations, stress, and distractions. Yeah, you get it. All I know is that Marcy had lost the attitude when I returned, and we managed to get back on track. But I knew something had happened during those months. The time she and I had been on the rocks. Or should I say, someone? It's a common thing in military marriages. We all like to think that military people and their spouses are angels. But the reality is that we are like everyone else, flawed. And most civilians do not understand the stress we are all under. I don't expect you to understand if you have not lived it. Hell, even some in the service choose to stick their head in the sand and think their lives are as ordinary as everyone else's. But they are not. The fact is that we have a higher than average divorce and infidelity rate. Go ahead, shoot the messenger. But after years in the service, I realize how lucky Marcy and I are to be together still, even knowing she had probably cheated when I was away. How did I know? Because Marcy and the kids went back to our hometown while I was away. While there, she got a job at the local hospital. It was near a hotel my ex-girlfriend from high school worked as a manager, and she saw Marcy at the parking lot of Red Roof and across from the hospital. Lydia let me know when I was still in Korea, but she didn't have definitive proof. So I hired an investigator to follow her. I felt stupid when I got the report. Marcy's hospital was renovating, and their parking lot was a construction site with only half the spots available. So Marcy had to park at the red roof and lot, as were half the nurses and orderlies at the hospital. But there was a timing issue. Marcy always showed up 90 minutes to 2 hours earlier for her shifts. But that had stopped when I returned home. If Marcy had been seeing someone, there was no way to know. Lydia could have been wrong or right, but it was enough for me to realize that I was neglecting my wife, and Marcy could have been going to another man since I was not there. There is nothing worse than knowing and not being sure. Having been posted to Korea once, I would never have to be posted there again. A year is a long time to lose from one's family. A year of lost connection with one's children and their lives I would never get back. And the last months of our separation had changed any notion I had that our marriage was unshakable. Who the guy might have been, I would never know. All I know is that we had young children then, and I wanted us to keep the family together. Also, Marcy seemed determined to solve our issues rather than leave. And so did I. But I had to give up something that had been dear to me. Flying. Being an Army helicopter pilot can be dangerous. Having flown Apache gunships in Desert Storm and peacetime, I knew that I was lucky not to have crashed or worse, and I was starting to see a slowing down in my reflexes. That was the final draw. When the opportunity to switch to Army intelligence came, I took it. It meant less dangerous assignments and, better yet, more time at home. Now, I did deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan 3 times when the war there flared after September 11th. But in my new capacity as an Army spook, I was safe in the rear with the gear, as they say in the combat arms. It gave Marcy peace of mind, but I worried about how things were back home with her. Hearing of marriage after military marriage failing in all those years got to me. On my last deployment, I knew I had enough. Instead of going to Army Command and Staff College, the prerequisite school before becoming a general, I decided it was time to get out. It hurt, but I realized that Marcy and I had almost lost each other and broken up our family twice. The odds of us surviving if I stayed in for the general's stars that may or not come were not good. After I retired, the job I landed as a consultant brought in more money than had I stayed and became a general. Did I miss it? Sure I did. But then, some things in life are more important than others. I was there for my daughter's senior year in high school, and I saw her and my son graduate. And I still had my wife. That is priceless. Marcy had continued with her nursing education and now was the top nurse in a hospital surgical team. They did brain surgery, of all things. Yeah, life and death specialized stuff. The hospital had a group of brain surgeons who did the cutting, but 3 stood out. A retiring older doctor, a woman in her mid-40s, and a 40-year-old new talent that had joined them that year. Dr. Trey Cardosa. I had met him a few times at parties. Being tall and handsome, Dr. Trey was typical of specialist surgeons, full of himself. They do get God complex after they dig into enough brains and save a few lives, these types. And I could tell he had a thing for Marcy, who kept herself in good shape. Did I tell you she had been a cheerleader in college and a long-distance runner? Yeah, well, she had the figure of a 30-year-old at 47, something that Dr. Trey did not fail to notice. I had caught him staring at her when he thought I wasn't at parties. I could just imagine how he was with her at work when I was not around. And much to my dismay, she gushed over how great a surgeon he was and how he would be the next leader of the hospital surgical team. I was starting to worry. The one time I brought it up, she stayed quiet for a while before saying anything. I understand how you feel, Rick, but this is my job. I have to work with these doctors, and frankly, they are aggressive with all us nurses. It takes the edge off in the operating room. Usually, after a very stressful moment that the doctors manage to save the patient. The flirting is a relief mechanism to us all. Then it gets serious again, and no one does anything. What about in between, Marcy? Do you just turn it off? When you go to his office or lunch? Just how does my wife openly flirting with another man work? Do you remember how you and that CIA woman were tight as a team before you deployed to Iraq? Yes, but we didn't. I tried to say, how do I know what you did and what you didn't do? She said mockingly, doing air quotes. I know that she was smitten by you before you deployed. I saw it in her face, Rick. Had I told her it was okay, she would have gone on her knees for you. Marcy, nothing happened with Deidre. So you say, Rick, I had to trust you with Deidre. So now you have to trust me. It had not been a good evening after that. It has been 4 months since that conversation, and the issue hung in the background of our life like an ominous cloud. If they were doing anything, they were doing it at work. But I have been in hospitals enough to know there were plenty of rooms and offices unoccupied for people to use and find privacy. And her red roof and 2-hour early arrivals of the past haunted me. But she did have a point. I either trusted her or I didn't. The thing is, Marcy was also justified to be suspicious. Deidre Keel had indeed offered herself to me in Iraq. And once, after we survived a roadside ambush, she had cornered me in an unoccupied office. Not having had sex in 3 months, I gave in to her advances. We were thinking of going all the way when the sirens went off, and the base was under mortar and rocket attack. We took it as a sign to be wary and never did mess around again. At first, I had felt guilty. But then I remembered what Marcy had done when I was in Korea and said to myself, if she can do it, so can I. This was my turn. It's mindless sex, and that is all. Once I get back, this will be as it never happened, and Marcy and I will be even. I was fooling myself. So here we were, 2 cheaters, still married to each other, discussing trust. Yet considering how Marcy was still attentive and loving, I figured I had been paranoid due to our past. I was almost positive she had cheated back then, but almost doesn't cut it. On the other hand, I knew I had. Not all the way, but in my book. And now their entire team was on the way to South America for a Doctors Without Borders excursion. Brain surgery for poor people in 5 countries lasting close to 6 weeks. Marcy knew I was not keen on Dr. Trey, but this trip was not something she would pass on for her career. Nor was I going to make waves considering how supportive she had been of my military career. I've stayed home many times for you, she had said. Many times not knowing if you were still alive or dead, Rick. Suppose you had crashed or been taken prisoner, like those men and women in Desert Storm. I would have had to raise 2 children alone. I did my part. Now it's your turn to wait for me. What do you say to that? Things were a bit strained in the morning when she left for the airport. The night before, she had spent a lot of time packing and talking on the phone to her mother. I found it irritating as it cut into our intimate time alone. Time that seemed less and less in recent months. Not wanting to start an argument, I let her do her thing and went to bed. I woke the following day with her gone. No message, no kiss goodbye, and nothing else either. I looked around the house in case she left a note, but there was nothing to find. Just the missing clothes she had packed and her laptop. Just in case, I checked my phone for messages, and there were none. To say I was annoyed and worried about the way she left was an understatement. I was pissed. After I made some coffee and calmed down, I looked up her flight. It was on the way to Colombia, their first stop. They would land in a few hours, and hopefully, she would text or call from there. Oh well, I thought, another chapter in the marriage. Only she didn't call or text or anything. After double-checking that her flight had landed in Bogota, I debated contacting her. But all I sent her was a short text. I hope you are doing well. Nice way for you to leave Marcy. Speaks volumes. I received no reply. Not the next day or the one after. Running had always kept me focused when I was stressed, and this time was no different. It took all my self-control to keep a steady pace, but my frustration and anger at my wife's silence drove me to run faster than usual. By the time I reached near our cul-de-sac and sprinted the last block, I was out of breath and gasping for air. Rick, are you okay? I heard a familiar male voice ask. Looking up, I saw Vincent Nielsen in his front yard. They didn't live in the cul-de-sac, but their house was just behind ours, with our backyard separated by a small fence and a gate we never locked. Just past him, I saw his young wife on her knees working on the flower bed. Nice. I thought as Vinny turned to see what I was staring at. Nice view, eh? He asked with a suggestive smile. I looked away from his wife's and just nodded. That was a strange situation, but my mind was too preoccupied to take it all in. Vince, I replied. I am tired from my run and need to hit the shower. Catch you another time, okay? Sure, he replied. Leslie, and I would love to have you over. I mean both you and Marcy. She is out of the country for a few weeks, I replied, noticing Leslie turning to smile, still on her knees. Oh, that. Was she wiggling it? What the hell? You can come by yourself then, he replied. We can grill some steaks. Bring a six-pack or some wine if that will make you feel better. I replied, okay, I will let you know. You are always welcome, Rick, the younger man said with a weird, knowing smile. Right? I said and walked to my front door on the sidewalk. That's the long way around, Rick. You must be tired. Please feel free to go through our yard. I did. But my mind was on my wife and her disappearing act without a word. Still, Leslie's bum and inviting smile were a close second. I wondered what going through her yard would be like before I went into our house. The call from hell. After a shower and a cold drink, I looked around our empty home. The TV droned on as I waited for a call from my wife that never came. Before I noticed, it was dark outside. And still, no call, text, or email from Marcy. I had enough and called her hotel. I had her itinerary pinned and knew her room number. Having checked the time, I knew it would be around 10 at night there. They patched me to her room, but there was no reply. I'm sorry, senor, the manager said in good but accented English. There appears to be no answer. Who am I speaking to? I asked. Pablo Espinoza, hotel manager at your service, senor. And your name is? Rick Weston. Pablo, Mrs. Weston is my wife. I have not been able to contact her since she left. Can you confirm that she has checked into your hotel? Do you know what she looks like? Have you seen her? Yes, senor. Senora Weston checked in with all the others from the medical team. I saw her earlier with them in the dining room. They came back from the hospital after surgery. They all looked tired. They ate and went upstairs. Can you send someone to check on her room and call me back? Let her know to call me. I will do so, senor, he replied. As he hung up, I realized that he had seemed guarded, as in careful what to say to me. And I had enough conversations with people from other countries to know that Pablo Espinoza was not struggling with his English. Looking at my phone, I reviewed my contacts. I was looking for the contact information of one of Marcy's nurses, Penny. Yes, she and Marcy were tight. In fact, we had gone to dinner with her and her husband last August. What was their last name? It started with, there, Penny and Josh Washington. Was Penny on the trip? Just then, my phone rang. I checked caller ID. Pablo Espinoza, Bogota, Colombia. Shit, not Marcy. Hello, Pablo, I said. Any news of my wife? Ah, well, senor. She was not in her room. I don't know where she could be. Maybe she and some of the ladies are together in a room. Or they went out. I realized that I was getting nowhere with Pablo. He was becoming tight-lipped and uncooperative. Can you do me a favor, Pablo? Yes, senor. He was no longer as polite, but he tried. What is Dr. Trey Cardosa's room number? 514, senor. Why? Do you wish me to call him? I winced, seeing in the itinerary that Marcy's room was 515. Not at this time, Pablo. I managed to keep my cool. One more thing. Si, senor, but I am kind of busy. Humor me, Pablo, and call the room of Mrs. Penny Washington, please. There was a slight hesitation, and then he replied, Si, senor, wait, please. And the line went to music. Elevator music. Even in South America. Some time passed, then I heard 3 long rings before someone picked up. Hello, Rick, Penny replied. She knew it was me. I had a feeling Pablo told her who was calling. Or she had expected me to. It kind of sounded like she had. Hi, Penny, I said. Sorry to disturb you this late. Don't worry about it, she said. Why are you calling me? Is Josh okay? Ignoring her question, I took a chance. I'll get to the point. Where is my wife right now? And sure enough, there was a few second gap from my question to her answer. Why do you ask me that? She replied as if irritated with me. But I could tell from her tone of voice that she knew why. Don't bullshit me, Penny, I replied. My wife's room is next to Trey's, and she is not in it. And I think you know why. Rick, I think you need to talk to your wife, she replied. But I could have sworn I heard a man's voice ask, who was that? Maybe I should talk to your husband about the man in your room, Penny. I have Josh's number, you know? I wonder what he would think about you having a man in your room away from home. She said nothing, but she covered the phone, and when she spoke again it was just her. Okay, Rick, please don't do that. I beg you, don't call my husband. This is the first time. I don't give a shit how many times you cheated on your husband, Penny, But if you don't tell me what you know about my wife, I will call your hubs and let him know in seconds. Now spill it. Where is my wife? The phones in that hotel had a transfer option to the phones of other rooms. Penny was not happy to transfer me, but she was very cooperative with the end of her marriage on the line. At least I knew she had no time to warn my wife. The phone to room 514 was ringing. Penny, why are you calling us? I heard Trey ask, thinking it was Penny he was talking to. Us? Who the hell was us? But then I got the gist of their trip. Us was my wife and Trey. Penny had her own us, with some guy other than her husband. It made me wonder how many more people of the surgery group were using the trip as an extramarital sex excursion. I hate to spoil your evening, Trey, I said with a cold voice. But this is Rick Weston, and I want to talk to my wife. It took him a few seconds to recover. Then he went on stupid mode. They all do that. Even more so the so-called smart ones. It's the arrogance that does it. Why are you asking me? He asked with a smug tone. Trey, if you value those surgeons' hands or your eyes, I would put Marcy on the phone. Do you understand? Are you threatening? Put my wife on the phone, a-hole. I finally lost my temper with him. Some noise sounded like a struggle for the phone. Then I heard my wife's voice. Give me the phone, Trey. I heard, her voice still distant. I would say good evening, Rick, but we both know that is not true at this point. What are you doing in Shithead's room? I asked, trying to keep myself from losing my temper. Why haven't you called or replied to my texts? And again, what are you doing in his room, Marcy? What the hell do you think I'm doing, Rick? She replied. I was having a good evening after a stressful day of surgery, until you called to play Clint Eastwood. At least she hadn't taken the Duke's name in vain. Just tell me the truth, Marcy. Are you and a-hole having an affair? She was silent for a second or two, and then spoke to the a-hole. Trey, can you give me a few minutes? She said to him before he grumbled something ineligible. Thanks, Trey. After that, neither of us said a thing for a few long seconds. I tried to get myself under control, and I bet Marcy did so herself. She spoke first. Rick, this is not how I thought we would have this conversation, or that we would tonight, but I guess we have to. I stayed quiet, a trick I had learned from interrogators. Once caught, perpetrators want to confess or spin their defense. Rick, I have been a good wife, mother of our kids, and everything I was supposed to be for us. I did all that for years. Well, I will be home in 6 weeks, and we can talk about where we go from here. But please, just once, this time away from you, let me have this. Just once, if you don't mind. If I don't mind, I repeated in near shock. The nerve. I had planned on calling you in a couple of days. After you and Trey got laid? I snapped back. How convenient. After you and the Nielsen's got together, Marcy replied. Have you talked to them yet? They invited me over for dinner. Why? It's more than dinner, Rick, Marcy said. Leslie wants you. She wants you to rock her world. I have talked to her about it, and it's okay if you do it by me. I'm not exactly an angel down here. Yeah, I can tell that, Marcy. 24 years of marriage, and this is how you check out? You didn't even have the decency to give me the, honey, we have to talk conversation in person? Rick, all that would have done is start an argument before I left. You think? I replied snidely. But then I may have asked you to stay and not go. I may have stayed, Rick, she said as her voice broke. But I wanted this. I need this just once in my life before I get old. I need this just once to feel alive. Just once to feel like a professional woman on her own. Did I ask you not to go? Or not to be a nurse? Did you? Oh, I get it. On your own means without a husband, the wife title, and all that baggage. Right. Rick, please don't take it like that. Look, when you were away all those years in the army, you were alone and judged by your profession. I want the same. Just once, I want to do what you did. As for Trey, that is icing on the cake. Rick, I don't love him. He's a sex toy, for Christ's sake. And I did leave Leslie for you. Right. Other wives leave behind a casserole. You left me? She chuckled nervously at that. What can I say? I care about my husband. What the hell, Marcy? Rick, she just turned 30. 30, Rick, you are 48. I am giving you a 6-week hall pass with our 30-year-old neighbor. Rick, how many women like Leslie do you have knocking on our door? Our. Just then, I wondered what was ours or not anymore. So you arranged a woman for me while you were screwing Dr. Trey. How thoughtful of you, Marcy. Pardon me if I don't say thank you. 6 weeks, Rick. 6 weeks and we get together again. I won't ask you what happened, and you don't either. No, wait. There is something you should know. She lowered her voice before continuing. When she spoke again, it sounded like her hand was over her mouth and the phone. Hi is not big as you, and he is not better. Just different, Rick. Only different. Do you get it? I get it all right, I replied. Just then, someone knocked on our back door. Look, Marcy. I have to go, she said nothing. I'll see you when I see you. I love you, Rick, I heard her say. I love you too, Marcy. But right now, I'm not sure that I am in love with you. I hung up on my wife, not wanting to drag out our pointless and painful conversation. Instead, I want to open the door to find Leslie. Evening, Rick, she said with a dazzling smile. I noticed she was alone, without her husband. Hello, Leslie, I replied nervously. My eyes gazed over her because she looked stunning. Leslie wore minimal makeup, just enough to accent her girl next door face. Are you going to let me in? She grinned, raising an eyebrow. Sure, I said, stepping aside so she could pass inside into the kitchen. I had been staring at her that I hadn't noticed she brought a bottle of wine with her. Offering it to me, she smiled. Red Moscato. How did she know I liked that? Then the light bulb went on over my head. Marcy. My wife had told her what to bring. I was hoping you needed some company. Not sure how good of a company I will be, Leslie, but I do want to ask you a thing or two. Sure, Rick, she said. If you do the honors, I'll look for some places. I pointed to the Winge glass cabinet and reached for the corkscrew. Where's Vincent? I asked, refraining from calling him Vinny as everyone in the neighborhood called him. He is off with his friends playing cards. I see, I replied, but in my mind, I mulled over how her husband had left his young wife alone. How many times had Marcy been alone while I had been off playing helicopter pilot? How many times had I left her to fend for herself? Alone, to be tempted as I had been in Iraq. So Marcy is off to South America, she said as I poured into her glass. Have you heard from her? Funny you should ask. I was just talking to I almost said my wife, but it felt strange to say in light of what had transpired. I mean Marcy, just as you knocked. Oh, I'm sorry, Rick. Did I interrupt? No, not really. We said just about all that needed to be said. I guess she sensed my terrible mood. Rick, I think we have to talk. We locked gazes then, me questioning, and my nubile neighbor pursing her lips before nodding. Let's sit, I said, pointing to the living room. How much has she told you? She asked, sitting just another person's distance from me with legs crossed. That was going to be my question. Why don't you start? It's only fair since I barged in and imposed, she replied. I had hoped Marcy would have talked to you before she left. Did she? No, I had to play phone tag with her, only to find out my wife is holed up with her doctor boyfriend in South America. Then she told me to talk to you. So let's stop playing this game and tell me what you and her planned before she left. Leslie nodded, then took a good pull from her glass. I guess she needed some liquid courage to continue. Some time ago, she and I ran into each other at the mall. We kind of hit it off and had drinks one day in our backyard. I don't know where you and Vincent were that day, but you know us girls and booze. Before long, I was prattling on about my marriage and my husband's weird desires. She stopped talking as if she was trying to decide what to say next. But I fell back on interrogation 101 methods and just looked back, saying nothing. And sure enough, talk she did. You see, Rick, my husband likes to share me. Share you? I asked, a bit confused before I figured out what she meant. Oh, you mean, with other men? She completed my sentence. That's interesting, I managed to blurt out. I mean, what does one say to that? And you told Marcy this, I gather? I was tipsy and, Rick, can I be honest here? Sure, be yourself. I find you attractive. Don't take it the wrong way, but I like older men. I'm flattered I fit your type. But why tell my wife? Because I wanted her to know and let me have a shot at you. Well, I did ask you to be honest. I replied, to which she toasted me and licked her lips. How did my wife handle that? I was surprised that she just listened and said nothing. Leslie continued. Nothing? At first, that is. She was a bit shocked at first, I guess. She asked me to explain how it works between Vince and me. As I explained, she seemed to be thinking about something because her eyes drifted off. Well, Marcy never brought it up with me, I said. At first, I asked her not to, and to just think about her sharing you with me, then to get back with me if she was willing. I scoffed at the nerve of this woman and wondered what it must be like being married to Vincent, or him married to Leslie. So, Marcy never talked to you about, you and me? She actually dropped that bomb on me over the phone just as you were on the way here. Tonight, she seemed surprised. Over the phone? Wow. I took a drink myself and nodded. Rick, you said you found out about her and her doctor gentleman friend tonight? I wouldn't call a man who hits and beds another man's wife a gentleman. I agree, she said. My husband shares me, but I never go behind his back. So Vincent knows you are here? Of course. My husband has known I am attracted to you since you moved to our neighborhood. I have not had a steady lover for a while and have been looking. You have steady boyfriends on the side? I only had one of those before. It lasted 2 years on and off. But mostly we take trips out of town and meet men. Vincent finds them online, and we meet them for dinner before or for drinks. If I like them, we go to our room. And what does Vincent do while you are with the guy? Well, Vince finds men online that are willing to let him in the room. He likes to watch, but it is also safer that way. I guess so, I replied, shaking my head. How long have you two been doing this? About 4 years, she replied nonchalantly as if we were discussing gardening. So what happened with Marcy after you asked her? Oh, yeah, Marcy, she replied with a smile. She came over a couple of weeks ago and said she was willing to, but I would have to do it with you when she was out of the country with her surgery group. Did she say anything to you about what or whom she was going to be doing while she was away? No, but we women can tell. I had a feeling she was doing a conscience trade-off. What do you mean? Well, from what you tell me, she probably knew then what she was going to be doing while she was away. Permitting me to have access to you was perhaps something to alleviate her conscience. Leslie shook her head then. I honestly wish she had talked to you beforehand. I don't like this cheating, sneaking around stuff. I said nothing at that. Not because I disagreed, but because I had cheated on Marcy. Here she was cheating on me at that moment, and I was feeling guilty about what I had done. I have something for you, Leslie said. A letter your wife left me to give you before we did anything. Reaching into her purse, she took it out and handed it to me. Go ahead, read it. I'll go to the ladies' room if you don't mind. She made a gesture and facial expression as if asking which way. Down the hall to your right. You can't miss it. Thanks. Be back in a jiff, Leslie said, smiling and emptying her glass. The envelope was plain. We had a box of them in my office down the hall. On it was just one word, Rick. Taking a deep breath, I opened it and began reading. Dear Rick, I'm a coward, and by the time you read this, you will know that I am also breaking our vows with Trey. But before you pass judgment on me, think about you and Deidre in Iraq. I have no proof, but I am almost positive that you and she had slept in Iraq. How do I know? Well, you have yourself and the Army to blame for that. Remember how I helped you study for your classes when you switched to Army Intelligence Branch from flying? Part of that was the interrogation and interview class. If you remember, people who lie look away when questioned and if they are guilty. And you, my dear husband, did just that not once, but 3 times when I brought her up. You are a terrible liar, Rick. But then I am no better. When Trey first put his hands on me, I never told you. Maybe I should have. And perhaps I should have had an affair or affairs during all those years that I was home alone and lonely while you were off playing soldier. Lord knows I got hit on enough. Often by your own friends when you were out in the field or deployed. I was even tempted once when you were in Korea for so long. It was the only time I questioned being married to you. When I met you in Hawaii at the 6-month mark, you were smug and dismissed my home issues. Our kids needed 2 parents, Rick. I try to be both mom and dad, but I am not you. Only you are you. And I needed my husband's touch. Damn it. But I resisted being hit on and stayed true to you. Lord knows it was not easy. Then you went off to Iraq, and your darling Deidre Klein came home before you did. The bitch came to visit me, and with a smug look, she told me that she took care of you over there, and then walked off before I could ask what she meant. But when you came back, I knew precisely what she meant. Any doubts I had you cleared for me when you looked away in shame, Rick. I know 2 wrongs don't make a right, Rick. I also know that there is a chance you and her did nothing. In which case, I am the first cheater here with Trey. But I don't think I am. I think you did it. Maybe you did before or not. Perhaps it was the first time or not. But I am done being the dutiful wife waiting at home and being chased for her war hero. When Leslie told me she had the hots for you, I talked to both her and Vincent about it. He admitted he lets her have men. They have an open marriage. It would appear that I won't have breaking up their marriage on my conscience. Just that I cheated on you. So, here is the gist of this situation we are in. I go on this trip, and during my absence, I am not your wife, and you are not my husband. You have a 6-week hall pass, and I am giving myself one as well. The way I see it, if you and I still love one another, we will get past this when I see you on my return. If we don't, it will hurt, and I will mourn what you and I had and lost. But I can't see us being married and not doing this. Know this. I was not seduced by Trey or forced into it. I am doing this by my own choice and free will. I don't love him, but I do find him attractive. He will be nothing but a memory when I return if you will still have me. What I do with him after you divorce me, well, that won't matter then, will it? Know this, Rick Weston. You have been, and still are the love of my life. Even after you broke my heart, I still love you. It has been a privilege being your wife and mother of your children. But after all these years, I need a vacation from us. Leslie is more than willing to screw your brains out until I return. Vincent would pay you to let him watch. But that is your choice and decision to make. I would suggest you screw her. Her husband lets her screw many men. I doubt she wants to give that up. I'll leave you with one thought. Rick, if you love someone, set them free. And let them come back to you. I'll be back in 6 weeks. Love you always and forever. Marcy. P.S. Leslie was supposed to get tested for STDs before she came over for her first time. Make sure she shows you that. Trey and I were both tested before we left. I will get tested for you before my return and not touch him or anyone else until you and I meet. Then I will show you my STD test. Please have one done a week before I return and abstain as well. If you and I are to make a go of it after my return, this will be our first sign of trust. I have reserved a room for us at the Ambassador Hotel near the airport. If you still want me, meet me there 2 hours after my flight is due back. I plan on going there alone after my arrival. Please don't come to the airport when my flight lands. Please don't make a scene. Either take me back or walk away. I plan on seeing you at the hotel. I'll be waiting for you in the lobby. When I finish reading it, I noticed Leslie was at the kitchen island filling her glass again. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, I replied. She nodded and came back with the bottle and her filled glass. Sitting next to me this time, she refilled my glass and turned to look at me with those doe-like eyes. So, Rick, what do we do? Right now, we aren't going to do anything, I told Leslie in a firm tone of voice. You and Marcy have been planning to ambush me with this little scheme of yours for 2 weeks now, and I'm just hearing about it tonight. And from what you're telling me, I get the impression she's had something going on the side for some time before that. Am I right? I guess so, she said, looking down. It was obvious she wasn't used to someone not instantly falling for her feminine charms, of which she had many. If I were a single man, I'd have fallen for it. But I don't like being played, and especially not by someone I had loved for most of my entire adult life. And I told her as much in no uncertain terms. You said yourself this was something she wanted to do to ease her own guilty conscience, I said. Or it could be something else. It's obvious this was something the two of you cooked up behind my back. She even told you what wine to get me. The problem is, I don't appreciate being used like that. I guess I can understand how you might feel, she said quietly. So I guess this means nothing is going to happen between us? Not tonight. Basically, it means I have a lot to think about and a lot to consider before I do something drastic, I said. I wanted her to think there was a chance that something might happen. I figured that way, she would be more open to answering whatever questions I might have. Right now, though, I needed information. There were too many things about this whole situation that didn't sit right with me. There's a saying that military people are very familiar with. Know your enemy. I hated thinking of Marcy as the enemy, but in my mind, she had drawn first blood, and I was determined to win, by any means necessary. So, Leslie said, can we count on you joining us for dinner in a day or two? I don't know, Leslie, I said. Right now, I'm not really in the mood for company. I have a lot to sort out. We'll see. Okay, she said quietly. Just know that I'll be available for you anytime. I appreciate that, Leslie, I said. Good night. And thanks for the wine, I added. Standing up, she took that as her cue to leave, which she did. I admired her as she walked away. I couldn't help it, and I am a healthy, red-blooded male. After she left, I picked up Marcy's letter and read through it again. It's amazing what you can see if you take the time to analyze a letter like this. For starters, I couldn't help but notice the venom when she wrote about Deidre Keel, the CIA operative I worked with in Iraq. Marcy even admitted she wasn't 100% certain that Deidre and I had sex, but she still referred to her as a bitch. Then, just a few paragraphs later, she's all but demanding I screw Leslie. How could she go from one extreme to the other in such a short space? That didn't make much sense to me. It's true that Deidre and I did get together once in Iraq, but that was in the heat of the moment, and we never once had sex. It happened right after we survived an ambush. It was the only time we ever messed around, and we certainly didn't spend weeks plotting it the way Marcy obviously did with Trey and Leslie. I remembered having mixed feelings about it at the time. On one hand, I felt guilty about cheating on my wife, but on the other hand, I already suspected Marcy was cheating on me, so I felt one good turn deserved another. I also wondered why Marcy didn't want me to meet her at the airport when she came back. I could understand her being concerned that I would get violent with her, but I had never given her any indication of that in the past. And why would she ask that I meet her in the lobby of the Ambassador Hotel? Why not come straight home? Unless, then it hit me. Was she really that devious? Of course, the fact that she plotted this for weeks right under my nose answered that question. But what the hell is really going on here? I turned and looked in the front room, looking for anything that didn't belong. Anything that might be a surveillance device like a camera or a microphone. I looked at the smoke alarm. Could there be a camera installed there? I decided to make a couple calls, but I didn't want to make them inside just in case I was being monitored. I grabbed Marcy's itinerary, went out the front door, and sat in the swinging chair I installed there some time back. Marcy knows that I'm a consultant, but what she doesn't know is that I'm actually the senior security consultant for Acme Global, a huge corporation with interests and offices around the world. It's my job to make sure those offices remain safe and secure, and it's my job to ensure the safety and security of our employees. That means I have contacts around the world I can reach out to if I need something done. My first call was to Alan Williams, the top tech specialist in my department. He was more than just good. He was the best in his business. Williams, he said when he answered the call. Alan, this is Rick, I said. How's it going? Going pretty good, boss, he said. But I get the feeling you didn't call me just to ask how I was doing. No, I didn't, Alan. I could use your expertise. I gave him the Reader's Digest version of what had happened and expressed my concerns. I'm sorry to hear that about you and Marcy, Rick. I understand your concern. Tell you what, give me about 45 minutes to get some gear together and I'll be right over. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. We ended the call and I scrolled through my contacts to find the second number. After I found it, I placed the call. Hola, Senor Rick, said the jolly male voice at the other end of the call. Ernesto, how are things with you, my friend? I asked. Ernesto Trujillo was my go-to man in that area of South America, and he was based at our office in, wait for it, Bogota, the very same city Marcy and her lover or lovers were currently based. I had dealt with Ernesto before and found him to be one of the most reliable and trustworthy men I had ever worked with. Oh, doing well here, boss, he said. I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. What can I do for you? I gave him the same rundown I gave Alan. Damn, he said when I finished. I am truly sorry to hear that, my friend. I take it you need eyes and ears on the ground here, then? Yes, Ernesto, I said, giving him the name of the hotel where Marcy was staying along with the room numbers of her lover, and Penny. I also told him about Pablo Espinoza, the hotel manager I had spoken to before. Can you do that? See, my friend, I can get you anything you need, he said. I take it you want audio, video, and pictures? Yes, the works. And I'd like a daily recap if that's all right. Let me know if you need any walking around money and I'll wire down what you need. I'll also send you their itinerary for the next few weeks. Sounds good, he said. You want anything special done with them? I knew Ernesto had friends in both high and low places, but I wasn't quite ready to go there just yet. Not yet. Right now, I need information. We have 6 weeks. Okay, you're the boss, he said. Let me get started and I'll be in touch. Thanks, Ernesto. I really appreciate it. I'll make it worth your while, I said, and give my best to your family. Ernesto was married with 5 children, and he loved them all dearly. I know you will, and thank you. I'll pass that on to Lupe and the kids. After we ended the call, I scanned Marcy's itinerary, converted it to PDF on my phone, and emailed it to Ernesto. After I confirmed that he received the file, I put my phone away. Shortly afterward, Alan pulled into my driveway. He got out of the car and walked up, carrying a large case I knew was full of electronic gear. We shook hands on the porch and I ushered him inside. As I watched, he pulled some gear out of the case and began his search. In 30 minutes, he discovered miniature wireless cameras in several rooms of the house, mostly installed in the smoke detectors. All of them appeared to be sound or motion activated. There were cameras in almost every room of the house except for the bathrooms. We also found a few tiny microphones, and Alan discovered that our landline had also been bugged. These units don't have much range, Alan said. There's got to be a receiver around here somewhere. Maybe it's in the garage or the attic. We searched the garage but found nothing. I escorted him to the attic after grabbing a flashlight, and we looked around. Sure enough, there was a box in one corner of the attic with a laptop attached to it. When we moved the laptop, the screensaver came up. It was locked and I had no idea what the password might be. Alan checked it out carefully. It looks like this thing saves whatever audio and video the cameras and microphones gather, then uploads everything to the cloud later using wireless. Can you tell who this stuff belongs to? I asked. Alan looked at the box and found a sticker that read, Property of Smith Investigations, 1277 West Main Street, Suite A. There was also a phone number on the sticker. How convenient, I thought to myself. So, what do you want me to do with all this? Alan asked. Want me to disable everything? I thought about it for a bit before answering. My initial reaction was to have him get rid of it all, but I had another idea. Disable the camera and microphone they put in my office. Leave the rest up. They want video. I'll give them video. It'll be the most boring video they can imagine. Alan chuckled at that. I also had some ideas about using this gear to screw with Marcy's head a bit. Okay, he said. We left the attic and went back downstairs. Alan got rid of the camera and microphone in my office, then looked at the computer Marcy and I shared that sat on the desk. You want me to check that out as well? He asked. Yeah, let's cover all the bases. I brought the computer up and watched as Alan did his magic. Sure enough, Marcy had installed a keylogger program on it the night before she left. Since I hadn't used it, there wouldn't be anything for her to capture. After performing a thorough scan, he also found some spyware she or her private investigator had installed. He cleaned it all up and ran another scan. Looks clean to me now, he said. Why do you think she would go to all this trouble? I asked Alan. Well, if I were to guess, I'd say she intends to set you up for something, he said, confirming what I had already suspected. Maybe she's planning to divorce you and is getting ready to take your bum to the cleaners. I hate to say it, Alan, but I think you're right, I said. Mind if I make a suggestion? He asked as he put his gear away. Not at all. If she had an investigator come in to install all this stuff, chances are he's still got a key to your house, Alan said. After all, he'd have to come back at some point to collect his stuff. If I were you, I'd have the locks changed immediately, and I'd change the code on your security system. That's a good idea. I'll call a locksmith right away. Thanks for coming out, Alan. I really appreciate all your help. After we said our goodbyes, I pulled my phone out and looked up a locksmith. I found one and called. It would cost me an extra $50, but it was worth it to me. The last thing I wanted was some private investigator coming into my house. As I waited for the locksmith, I sat down to the computer Marcy and I shared. I fired it up and logged in as Marcy. I wanted to find out what she had been up to lately, and I figured this was as good a place to start as any. I pulled up her browser and opened her web email client. It came right up without even asking for a password. Apparently, I thought, her credentials had already been cached, and she hadn't changed it the way I suggested. This was one time I was actually glad she didn't follow my advice. Normally, I didn't snoop on her computer usage, choosing not to invade her privacy. But this was different. In my view, she had declared war, and I was determined to win. I looked through her emails. Most of it was spam, but there were a number of emails between her and Trey screwing Cardosa, the doctor she's now screwing in Bogota. Rather than read them all at once, I performed a search and was presented with a number of email threads between them that went back more than a year. Interesting, I thought. I selected them, then exported and saved them to a thumb drive so I could go through them later. There were several emails between her and the kids, small talk, mostly, and nothing of note. By then, the locksmith arrived and I showed him the doors I needed new locks on. I turned him loose on that and went back to the computer. Going through the threads between Marcy and her doctor, I found one with the subject, lawyer. Curious, I opened it up. The first was an email from her, telling Trey that she had just spoken with her lawyer, one Allison Hargraves, and had read the proposed divorce settlement and post-nuptial agreement. She argued against doing it, but I really don't care at this point, she wrote. I'm going through with this no matter what. You're going to actually divorce Rick? He wrote back. I thought you loved him. You said you intend to spend the rest of your life with him. What's going on? I do love him, she answered, and I intend to spend the rest of my life with him. But things are going to be different from now on. He's had 30 years to sow his wild oats in the army, and now it's my turn. And it'll be done on my terms. All these years, he's been an unknowing cuck. Not anymore. What are you planning? He wrote. I've got a letter I'm going to have Leslie give him, she said. I told him in the letter that he needs to meet me in the lobby of the ambassador when we get back. That's where I'll have him served with the papers. He'll be so distraught he'll do anything to avoid divorce. I'll take him to my room and hand him the post-nuptial. He'll have a choice, either agree to my terms or face ruin in a divorce. Damn, Trey said. You're cold. Remind me to never get on your bad side. LOL, she wrote back. So, what are you using for grounds? He asked. Adultery. And I'll have him dead to rights, complete with video. I've already talked to Leslie. She's had the hots for him for a long time. It was really pretty easy to do. I told Rick in the letter that I give him a hall pass to screw her brains out for the 6 weeks we're gone. What he doesn't know is that I've had the house wired for sound and video, and I've got a PI following his every move. His goose is cooked. He just doesn't know it yet. On top of that, my lawyer says I can sue Leslie for alienation of affection if I want to. So not only will I get half of Rick's military retirement, I'll get the house, half of all our assets, and I can stand to ruin Leslie and her husband financially. So, it'll be in his best interest to go along with what I want. Damn, you think he'll actually go for that? He won't have a choice, she said. I already told him in the letter he can either take me back or walk away. I doubt he'll walk away. What if he does? Trey asked. That'll be his loss, she said. You said he's been an unknowing cuck, Trey wrote back. How long have you been cheating on him? Years. It started when he was in Korea for a year. I moved the kids back home and started at the hospital. That was back when they were doing renovations. I had to park at the Red Roof Inn, like a lot of others, and I found I could go in an hour or two ahead of my schedule, meet up with another nurse, and still have enough time to clean up and go to work. Of course, I had to stop after he came home. Finally, I thought, after all these years, I know the truth. And he never suspected? Trey asked. Well, we did get together in Hawaii at the middle of the year, and I think he suspected something was going on, she wrote. It caused a really big stink, let me tell you, but I was able to get us past it. That's why I know I can do it this time as well. The only difference is that he'll know what I've been doing. You're taking one hell of a risk, Trey said. That was the first and probably only thing I would ever agree with him on. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, she said. "I just hope you know what you're doing," he said. "Don't worry," she answered. "I've got it all under control." That was the final email in the thread, thank goodness. I'm not sure how much more of that I could take. I printed out the email thread and put it in a folder. By then, the locksmith had finished up his work and handed me 3 new sets of keys. I paid him for his work and gave him an extra $50 for coming out after hours. After he left, I decided to do the same. I shut the computer down, then went upstairs to change. From there, I went out for a burger and a beer, stopping at a convenience store for some cigars. I hadn't smoked since I was in the army, and I felt like I needed something to keep me from punching someone's lights out. I couldn't help but notice a dark SUV following me. Whoever it was had been on my tail since I left the cul-de-sac. I didn't recognize the driver's face, but I did make note of the license plate and figured it was the PI Marcy hired. I gave him the runaround, hoping to lose him, but he managed to stay on my tail. When I pulled into Yancey's Bar and Grill, he pulled in as well. I had had enough of the bullshit and got out of my car. I walked straight to the SUV and saw the man's face go white when I yanked his door open. "Who the hell are you, and why are you following me?" I bellowed. I don't know what you're talking about," the smaller man stammered, his eyes wide. "Bullshit a hole," I said. "You've been on my butt ever since I left my house. Are you the PI my wife hired to follow me?" "I don't know what you're talking about," he said nervously. "You're a lying sack of shit," I told him. "And right now, I'm to here with lying sacks of shit, so maybe I oughta bust your chops right here. What do you say?" "Look, I don't know what you're talking about, mister. I'll leave, just don't hit me, please. I don't ever want to see you on my street or anywhere near me again. You got it, a-hole?" I said. "Next time I won't be so nice." "I got it," he said. "I am sorry." I slammed the door shut and watched as he started his SUV and drove off. After I was convinced he was gone, I went inside and ordered a burger and a beer. "Woman trouble?" the bartender asked when I placed my order. Was it that obvious? I asked myself. "Yeah, you could say that," I said. "You know what they say, can't live with him, can't shoot him," he said, causing me to chuckle. I finished my burger, which was quite good, and my beer, which hit the spot, and headed home. When I got there, I grabbed another beer out of the fridge, then headed out back to enjoy a cigar and think. As I enjoyed my cigar, a plan began to form in my mind. I pulled out my phone and looked up a few things on Google, which made me smile. I consulted the calendar and picked the date. I would have to make a couple calls to get it all rolling, but I didn't see any reason why it shouldn't come together. Just then, I got a text message on my phone from Ernesto. "All set? First recap in morning. If possible, please send $250 walking around $. The message was followed by a PayPal address. I pulled up PayPal and sent the cash in a note. "Thanks. We'll call tomorrow. Have an idea?" I got a response almost immediately. "Talk to you then." I finished my beer and my cigar and went inside. I trudged up the stairs to what used to be the bedroom I shared with Marcy. Out of curiosity, I went to her nightstand and opened the drawer.